Bienvenidos a el webinario.
Welcome to this webinar for the Interlace project. On this occasion, our topic is organizations that build capacities for nature-based solutions projects. And before we continue to present the project and the topic, we're going to talk about some of the technical topics. We ask you to change your language if you need it, because we have simultaneous translation into Spanish and English. And we also ask you to keep your microphones on mute. And whenever the Q&A round comes around, then you can participate and activate them. During the talks, you can ask us any questions via the chat, any concerns or comments or questions related to this specific topic for the person that is speaking, whoever you want to ask a question of. Well, the webinar will last approximately 90 minutes. And as always, those people that need a certification or a certificate of participation for having been in the seminar, in this webinar today, we can please write the email proyectointerlace@ong.or.cr, proyectointerlace.unglor.cr. So the purpose of this session is to see what the role is of many non-government organizations like universities, like think tanks, also private companies. They've for quite some time been supporting the adoption of sustainability type programs, and more specifically with the idea of nature-based solutions. So the idea of the approach for sustainability and now the Sustainable Development Agenda in European countries, they have a tradition or they have an implementation which has been around for much more time than in Latin America. In Latin America, we're just beginning. Just a few years back, this has started to be put on the public agenda, especially in subnational governments. These organizations have been working for quite some time, and they've contributed enormously to the adoption of these programs. Thanks to them, many governments, many cities have been able to have successful interventions. So today we have guests that will speak about their experience in this specific type of accompaniment. First of all, I want to welcome Thomas. Let me see if I can pronounce his name properly. Thomas Berger. He's a professor. He's got a PhD. Thomas Berger. He's a professor in the University of Cracovia, in the University of Science and Technology of Cracovia. He's published many papers in terms of the challenges in sustainable development and environmental protection. He has worked in Poland and abroad in many interventions related to projects that work with these specific issues. He also has broad experience in managing water, which is a very relevant issue for these times that we should have thought about this before, obviously, but with him, we're going to have another speaker that is going to accompany us, Lucas Emil Serap, which will accompany us and talk about his experiences and the experiences in his city with the help of Thomas's university. So now we welcome them. Please, Thomas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for this wonderful introduction. and I am really happy to be here. Let me share my screen. I hope that you can see and hear myself. Wonderful. I mean, I am happy to be here. It's not just a diplomatic, so to speak, correctness, because what we found very important in the St. Jimmy Foundation, which I am also the member of, besides of being the part of the professor on the university. And today I would like to share with you some projects by the St. Jimmy Foundation. And actually what we are doing in the St. Jimmy Foundation is our mission, our passion, our goal is to support local communities, especially municipalities, in so-called green transformation. And before the main part is about the free project, which is a kind of, our recent, so to speak, activities. But let me share with you a very brief information about our quite long history. The St. Jimmy Foundation was established in 1998, and since 2 decades, more than 2 decades, we've been active in Poland. On the first decade, we were teaching, educating people on sustainability generally, cooperating with Dr. Jan Sędzimir, our founder, Gisela Bosch, and Professor Charles Hibbert from the University of Florida. And we've been teaching people in Poland and then also people from the abroad, so to speak, about the application or how to apply sustainability. But always, even in this decade of education, we've been cooperating very closely with the municipalities, institutions, and businesses and companies in Poland. So we were very oriented on the practice, on the application side. And for a decade or more, we are more and more a kind of think tank or even the research institute who is helping Polish society, local communities, municipalities in green transformation, especially about NBS, green space area protection management, using NBS for climate change adaptation mitigation. It's a very practical approach now. And I think that's the most important, is to show some real projects. So I'm going to share with you 3 of many of our projects. And the first is, sorry, the last part of our introduction. I think that there's 6 buttons, 6 boxes showing what are the main areas of our activity now. So it's like I say, nature-based solution, or green areas management, water, as was mentioned before, but also a very important part of our activity is the public participation. So anything we are doing, we are not doing as an experts, even we are experts in a sense, but we are trying to include people, we are trying to include stakeholders, and that's very important leg. So know-how, knowledge, science is one leg of our foundation, and the second leg is the participation. How to involve, how to include people in citizens, decision makers, all stakeholders in this transformation. And we also publish a lot, kind of guidelines, not only scientific publications, but as a St. Jimmy Foundation, we are producing a lot of guidelines. And on the end, maybe I will say a little bit more about it. And I am going, as mentioned, to present you 3 projects. And the small one, in a sense, of the scale, micro scale even, but quite long project, or series of projects, is about rainwater gardens. About 10 or more years ago, we produced the first guidelines in a cooperation with Melbourne from Austria, which translated and adopted their guidelines, they design guidelines to Polish reality. And since this moment, we've been developing this project. So we are helping local communities to build a very small local scale, medium scale, it depends, nature-based solution, blue-green infrastructure, call it as you wish, to retain water, to clean water, to store water in the landscape, even in the very urban, so to speak, conditions. We are trying to build this little sponge, so to speak, to catch water in different forms, in the ground, in the planter, many different forms. And we are producing a lot of materials to help investments, to help citizens, to help businesses, municipalities to build such a solution. So we are showing how to size, how to design this area, how to shape them, how to solve the technical solution, which plants we should use. We've got more and more experience, and we also help people to construct stormwater gardens. That's something which is really developing very rapidly. A lot of municipalities are trying to cooperate with us. We've built tens or hundreds of such as stormwaters in Poland, also teaching people how to do it and why to do it. But also the very important part is the participation. So we do it with end users, with students, with pupils, with parents, with teachers, with seniors, with local activists. So as I mentioned at the beginning, is usually not just to build something, but to involve people, so to speak. So that's very nice. I really like Storm Garden itself, but also the whole process. As I said, is more like a series of the projects. It's also the chance to use people's creativity, art skills, and but what is also important, very often we involve people and stakeholders not only in the construction part but also in the planning part, which is much more difficult. And that's also connected to our bigger project, which I am not going to present in details, but it's also an example that the small rainwater gardens initiatives very often turns into something bigger. So for example, we've got the big project Climate Friendly School, and we are turning the existing school in Wawer, in Warsaw, in our capital city, into the local center of NBS. So the whole school is going to be to be green, in a sense, again, with students, with teachers, and with other schools. So it's, the range is quite big, but we started from the one small rainwater gardens there, and then we develop the cooperation, the trust, so to speak, and now we are really transforming the whole thing, unpaved the inner yard, to build the green walls. I mean, there are a lot of solutions. The whole thing is going to be like a sponge school, so to speak, retaining the whole water on the ground, but also showing people from the neighborhood, from the whole Warsaw, that it can be done. Zero discharge is possible also in Poland. That's the first project. And the second is Green Leader. That's quite special thing, because it's not only about the green transformation, but it's also about leadership, about civil society. And this project is done together with Polish American Freedom Foundation. And they were active in Poland for many years for this kind of democratic transformation, so to speak. In one moment, they decided that they should have something about green environment management protection, NBS, and they involved us. And there are very many. My time is very short, so I hope that there will be some discussion later. But let me present this Green Leader thing in a very short way. That this program is not for individuals, but it's for teams. So we are educating or cooperating actually with 3-person team from the local community, from the municipality. And we are not teaching them, but as in many of our projects, we are working with them on a kind of solution. So they are coming to the training with the challenge, and we are trying to solve them this problem together with our experts, with external experts, and with their capacity, inner capacity, and also with other teams which are supporting each other. That's very good atmosphere, so to speak. Very active people, very green leaders, actual leaders. So this program is for small and medium-sized cities, towns in Poland, less than 100,000 people, and usually we've got 3 people from 3 sectors. So there's a official, usually mayor, from the city hall, from the municipality. Usually also the civil society members, like a council members or the local council, regional council, people who are selected, voted by citizens, and usually the local leaders, NGO members. So it's also the very important part of this program that they are cooperating with each other. They need to organize themselves to apply, to persuade us that they should be selected because we've got many candidates, and then they need to cooperate on the important local issue. And there's the graphical part, so I couldn't communicate, but I think it's quite important because we start from e-learning. So they are teaching, they are cooperating on the virtual phase. It's also a kind of recruitment or selection process for us, but still everybody is gaining some benefits from this phase. And then we have the training itself, and we also have the individual support for them by experts. And we are also organizing the site visit, the field visit in Poland or abroad. And as the result, the action plan is created, so to speak. And the whole thing is financed by the foundation, Polish American Freedom Foundation, so they don't pay. They need also to cover the travel. And they have 3 thematic paths to choose. So one is NBS, water, where I am an expert. There is also solid waste topic and air. So they are choosing one and working on the action plan around this topic. But of course, very often there is a transdisciplinary issues. The reality is quite complex. So we are not stuck in a sense in the path, but it's more like a kind of label. And here you can see the benefits which are gathered from the surveys we've been doing with the Polish American Foundation. They are really monitoring the program very carefully. So the size of this bubble, so to speak, shows what are the most important benefits for them, for the leaders from the program. So you see that not only specific scientific knowledge, know-how is important, but also the soft skills, relationship, like motivation, leadership skills, action plan. So it's more soft aspects, so to speak, not only technical one, but of course the exchange of knowledge is important. Interesting fact, due to the project, or thanks to the project, to the program, they invested their own money to these action plans, or found the external funds to invest their ideas on the sum of 2 million zlotys, which is about €500,000 or dollars. Quite a significant change. Of course, the money is not important, but you can see that there's a real transformation, real change. Now we've finished the 3rd edition, so it's quite successful. I really like it, and I think this is also the part of transformation in the whole Poland, actually, and especially the small towns usually are not very well connected to money, to knowledge, so it's important for them. We've got the good opinions from them, and we are in touch. So they are coming for the next edition. So the whole network is developing, so to speak, growing. And the 3rd project is the standards, which we developed together with 2 big cities, standards of maintenance for green areas. And this program was initiated by Wrocław, Green Space Authority and Krakow Green Space Authority. Monika Pec-Święcicka, who has been cooperating with us for many years, couldn't come today, but we got Łukasz Milczarek, also our colleague and friend from Krakow, and I will give the floor to him in a moment. But again, I would like to give you a short introduction about the third project, and this is about the participation between municipalities. It's quite something, and quite difficult too. And generally, the origin of the project was to create the common open access standards for how to maintain, how to create green areas in the cities, in municipalities, so to speak, and not to develop something for the city, for Krakow or for Wrocław, but open access which could be used and shared with all municipalities, also the small one. So of course there are many challenges for green space authority, many expectations, so to speak. Climate change also is changing the whole thing, you know, the water availability, the species behavior. So this kind of standards are very important. And what's also challenging, that there was the idea that they should be complex and simple. So it's not like a big document which nobody is able to read, but this complex knowledge should be translated into something very useful. And also very easy to use in public tender. That's the most important tool which municipalities have, public tender. So if you have the good solution, that easy to use or ready to use solution, you can easily copy, so to speak, them into the whole system. And we were the so to speak the coordinators of the whole thing. We were trying to cooperate with many partners, but as I said, the whole thing was requested by Wrocław and Kraków municipalities. Here you see the team, quite difficult to work with. People, experts from many, so to speak, disciplines. So the discussion were very, very difficult and very complex, but in the end, we've got also some skills how to organize the process. So all of these public participatory tools and techniques, methods which we usually use, were quite handy here. And we managed to produce these standards. And I think there's a good moment to give the floor to Łukasz Milczarek, who is the user and co-creator, one of the co-creators of the standards. So if I may, please, Łukasz, take the floor. Hello.
Hello. Good morning and good evening, depending on the hemisphere we are. So thank you, Tomasz, for introduction and for the very brief presentation of activities of Sędzimir Foundation, which is very, very impressive in Poland. So also brief, I would like to present the standards, green standards, which we use in Kraków and Wrocław, and I hope so. These standards will be also much more common in the whole of Poland, and maybe someday we will translate also to the other language these standards, because they must be very universal. So we divided the standards in 6 thematic booklets. Yes, and these booklets reflects the main topic related with green space management. Yes, and also reflect our dividing in our companies in the different teams, because all of these themes are very specialistic. Yes, but as Tomasz said before, these standards show this knowledge in very friendly to users way. So first booklet is about the preparation of the work, about the employee, about the knowledge of employee which we expect, and also the equipment and for example, safety of work or the wear of the employee. Second volume is about the planting of the plants, not only the trees, but also the perennials and shrubs. Third one is about meadows. So this very as a loan or and management of these areas. Fourth is specialistic about the maintenance of green, quite a large volume, like you see on the picture from the right. Fifth one is about the maintenance of the infrastructure and the space as a whole. Yeah. So even the paths. And sixth one, very important to me, is about the biodiversity. It's also very quite large volume. And all of that inside is very rich in the pictures and it keeps the friendly way to presenting the information. So here we see the example of the volume about maintaining of trees. Very easy way to show how to plant the tree, but there is also information how to check the quality of the tree material, for example, in easy way, and do not damage the plant, which is also very important in management process. And very important thing is the management of space. To do the diversification of space, because space in the city have very different users, and we also need the very different ecosystem services from that space. So we have a space with very intensive management when the love moving is frequent, even the 4 times per year, and we have also much more or less management areas, and even the eco zone when the space is given to the nature. Yes, and we even there is no moving of the grass or trees, and very important leaving the so-called dead wood. And all of things are included in the standards. And what is important, these things also are reflected in our management system, GIS system, where we can all of these zones divide. Here we see the example of ecosite. where we try to leave a lot of microhabitats, create a lot of microhabitats, or giving the space to create the microhabitat, because they usually, that microbes create by ourselves, yes. And one of these best way is leaving the dead wood and senescent trees with the holes of woodpeckers, and it's a very, very good example of standards. But we also must remember that people are not used to such space. So there also must be some information that this dead wood is living there because it's our intention to do that. Standards, as Tomasz said, are public available on internet, on at least 3 different places, on Sędzimir Foundation webpage, from webpage of Wrocław Green Space Management Board, and also our Kraków Green Space Management Authority.
Thank you, Łukasz, very much. As I said, that's a very special, very specific also project, and for me, it was quite difficult because the whole thing is really based on the science and different disciplines. So it wasn't easy to have a dialogue and a kind of decision, so to speak, to make the decision with all of this representative different disciplines and practitioners too. On the other hand, I think that we managed to integrate the different shapes. The conventional maintaining is quite advanced or experimental, like eco-zoning, as Łukasz said, which is in Kraków slowly being accepted. In small towns is much more difficult. So we see a huge potential in changing the green space management, maintaining with the standards, and also how to, especially how to compare or how to feel the needs of different groups of people, because there are different people with different expectations, but also nature. So I think that the green space in cities is under huge pressure on one hand and huge expectations. So hopefully the standards will help to solve this challenges, so to speak, especially to support also the smaller municipalities in such a transformation. That's all from our side. We are very opening to have this discussion. There's contact information. As I mentioned, we also published a lot of guidelines. So there is a new, not yet published, but very soon published the guidelines on the urban rivers. And most of our publications is both in English and Polish. So if you are interested, please visit our site. And thank you for your attention. Thank you again for invitation.
Thanks a lot, Thomas and Lucas. It has been quite interesting, mainly as the question that I posted in the chat, because given the background, the political background of Poland, I mean, that represents many challenges for citizen participation, but we can talk about it later on. And now we are going to leave the floor to Julia Gomez Candela and Jeremías Díaz Canedo, who belong to the company Díaz Candelas. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction about their backgrounds. Jeremías Díaz Canedo, Jaime.
Jeremías Díaz Canedo, Jaime.
She has a master in advanced administration from Yale University, an MBA for IE from the business school, and He also has diplomas from Harvard and from the Federal Reserve of New York and other financial institutions. He has a lot of experience advising national and subnational governments regarding sustainable finances. And Julia Gomez Candela, she's an architect, and she has also worked on issues regarding to housing. And she has been invited by very prestigious universities such as the Universidad Politécnica de Madrid, Princeton, and Columbia University in New York for talking about these issues of housing and public spaces and all these topics. So I'm going to leave the floor to them and they are going to share the experience that they have had mainly in Latin American countries. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you very much, Heidi. Julia, I think you have the presentation ready. While Julia pulls up the presentation, first of all, Tomas and Lucas, thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I think we have a lot of common ground and would love to talk to you further about all your initiatives. We've done similar things with urban orchard programs and so on, but we think some of the things, if not all, that you showed us could be implemented in Latin America for sure. So thank you again for your great presentation. We actually have the presentation in Spanish, so I think I'm gonna switch if that's okay, Heidi.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Bueno, pues muy buenos días.
Okay, so very good day to everybody. First of all, I wanted to thank all of you for this invitation for this forum. For us, dialogue and sharing ideas and experiences is really fundamental in order to promote sustainable development, and we hope that our talk today will contribute to that purpose. So on this occasion, and given the nature of this forum, we've developed a presentation which is focused more on our work in terms of housing and urban development, and talking about a specific case that we think is highly relevant because we believe it showcases all the process of diagnosing the problems, root causes, developing strategies, implementation strategies, and then measuring the results after the implementation, which is a project that we did a while ago and that we are now, or this is a strategy that we implemented a while back and we're assessing, we're trying to see how we correct it and improve it. So in this sense, well, we have three different sections, 3 objectives. One is introduce the work that we've done. The second purpose is to expose this case about the national housing project in Mexico. And finally, we would like to open up the forum to Q&A and comments from the different participants. So seeing that they've already introduced us, well, let's go into what Díaz Candelas does. And briefly, we're going to describe this, and Julia will give you more details about many of the different projects that we worked on that better are examples that sometimes it's like marketing a little bit, but well, as we have it in our website, we use experience together with advanced analytics to find opportunities, develop projects, and offer higher, superior projects, and financial viability, feasibility, with the environment. And as we wrote here, Julia and I are the founding partners of Díaz Candela's company, but we have lots of collaboration with different nationalities, with different disciplines. Julia is an architect, I'm an economist. So we're almost always having very interesting conversations and exciting conversations, which are very animated. So Julia, I'm not sure if you want to continue. You can tell everybody about some of the projects that we have worked on, and especially more related to this context. Thank you very much, Jeremias, and thank you to Dia and Carolina that are connected here, which we had a phone call before.
It was amazing to hear your presentation. I am pretty interested in the standards that you presented, so it would be lovely to have a talk later or whenever you can. Regreso
Now let me go back to Spanish.
Me gustaría
Here we are. So I would like to speak to you, and as Jeremia said, we'll get the first part of our presentation
con los trabajos que hemos realizado
with the work that we've actually performed and emphasizing how relevant it is to develop diagnosis and identify root causes and implementing and measuring the results that we're proposing. I will try to be very concise and brief because, as you know, architects, we tend to add many slides, but I'll try to go quickly so that we can advance and you don't get bored. So this first part was divided into the work that we've actually generated, Jeremiah and I, when we worked in Infonavit. Infonavit is the biggest real estate company in Mexico and the fourth largest in Latin America. And those that don't know Infonavit, if you have any doubt, we can talk about we're no longer working in Infonavit, now we're working 10 Candelas. But first, we'll talk about the initiatives that we had in the Research Center for Sustainable Development, and then about our work in 10 Candelas. This first part, I will divide it into abandoned housing, expanding, and assisted production, social housing in the center of the downtown, social cohesion as well, where we have certain points with what Thomas and Lucas presented, the reconstruction, there's natural disasters, which all of you that know that live in these areas, we've lived in many tragedies, right? One recent one in Acapulco. And all of these problems, we think we share these problems with many Latin American cities. When we came to Infonavit, we faced diverse problems. We were very young at that time. We continue to be young, and especially in our spirits, we're very young. But we have a huge ambition to try to solve the problems of housing in Mexico. The abandoned housing was an effort that we were able to classify, identify, and systematize abandoned housing, which was a great problem that we found, which was many vandalized abandoned houses, which is a system of very poor urban planning, really, and which has a bunch of associated problems, from social problems, environmental problems, health problems, etc. Abandoned houses is really problematic. And after we worked in Infonavit, we also developed certain diagnosis, comprehensive diagnosis, and different plans that we've created in order to answer this problem, this problem of abandoned house, especially in the north of the country and next door. Another one of the things that we would like to talk about is that social housing is not only new housing that is built and the new policies of housing, but we also have a park, which is
Entonces, generamos este proyecto de mejora y ampliación.
We also generated this improvement that tried to work with these standards. A series of an echo of what Thomas and Lucas spoke about how we can do expansion projects and different housing prototypes that already exist, that go from personalizing housing for people that have disabilities, or co-technology, or the expansion of one additional rooms, because many of these houses, we had families that actually were living in groups that were very large, with large sums of people, many people, all of this trying to be sustainable and without any structural risks when we do these modifications. We also found another constant thing is that the people not always have the capacity, or not always
una vivienda construida, sino que ellos mismos la hacen.
So not everybody can actually buy a home, so they tend to produce themselves. And there's a project called Territory to the Inhabitant. There was more than 100 pieces of research done, and they were basically looking for self-production homes in different parts of the Republic, looking at the materials, the construction methods. So basically a home that is built in Tijuana is not the same as homes built in Chiapas or in Guanajuato. So it's very different when you're building in Krakow, Florence, or Madrid. Each place is different and needs a different kind of home. And there's also a phenomenon which is something that happens quite generally around Latin America, and that's the fact that social housing tends to be in the peripheries of the city. So one of our initiatives was to bring social housing to the center of the cities. So the Homes in History project was to bring social housing to the center of Puebla. And so the idea is that we can start to revert this phenomenon. Another issue that we had when we went to live on Avid was that we wanted to have home developments just made of houses. So the problem is there were no parks, no libraries, no education centers, no markets, no stores. So we performed a number of cultural projects as well. And what they sought to do was to generate social cohesion. So this could be translated into an architectural project. And we created these reading rooms. They're modular rooms. The objective wasn't just to have a reading room, but to foster reading among people in the community. So we created an agreement with the Culture Secretariat, and through social work, people from the community itself became reading promoters and went to these reading rooms to bring the whole community together. We also had mural paint projects, projects for sports. So lots of different kinds of projects that were created. And so at its heart, we wanted to promote social cohesion, as Thomas and Lucas were saying, involving senior citizens, young people, children, migrants, everybody who was around, to create a spirit of community. As you all well know, and as I mentioned earlier, climate change has meant that natural disasters have become a lot more intense and a lot more common. So Jeremias and I are part of the Center for Sustainable Development Research, and we were in charge of looking at natural disasters. And from 2013 to 2018, we had to provide help for different phenomena, so things like earthquakes or other disasters. And so we were always involved in first response and in construction. So there's a really lovely project that we performed after 2007, after the isthmus. And as I mentioned before, we created a new road called Istantelas, and we had a policy linked to housing, to migration, to territory development, touristic development, and other indicators linked to sustainability. So I wanted to just highlight the fact that it hasn't been easy. We have had many difficulties when it comes to collections in the project, and we've been trying to maintain the integrity and stick to the principles of objectivity and quality in our work. So a lot of this work has been performed with contracts. Sometimes they don't pay us, so it's been really hard to collect that money, and this obviously happens to others. I'm not trying to complain, I just want to share that with you and tell you some of the challenges that you can face in this Latin American world. In first place, we want to show you this. This is the master plan that was developed for intervention in Tabasco, in the capital of Tabasco. It's a city towards the south of the city, the southeast of the country rather. And what we were trying to do is activate the economy and tourism through an intervention in the river. I know that many cities have turned their backs on water, and in Barcelona this has happened with the ocean. So Tabasco turned its back on the Rio Talba, so we wanted to integrate it in the city with a multidisciplinary project. There were lots of themes. We don't want to look at this in depth because obviously time's running out, so we have to go very quickly. We were able to collaborate in writing up the National Housing Program of Mexico that Jeremias, my partner, will go into briefly. And we were also able to work on the national policy for housing of Bolivia. I would highlight another constant here that we have had to face in our continent, which is political volatility, or this can also be linked to the short-term mentality in the country. And in this project, we had to develop it throughout the political crisis of 2019 in Bolivia. And in November, literally, when Evo Morales left and Janine came in, that was the issue we had to face. So it was a change, and it was difficult to see how this policy was going to be implemented, who would be the counterparty, who we could talk to about this. So we wonder whether anybody else in this forum has had this issue. And also through Civic Alliance, we were able to create a forum for mayors linked to human mobility, immigration and development. We think this is a growing problem, not just in Latin America, but also around the world. So migration has become an issue, the arrival of communities and populations that have come from different places, not just due to climate change, but also due to violence, to see how we can basically adjust the cities that are going to host them. We also collaborated in the definition of sustainable community around the Maya train and the 4 municipalities through which it goes. We also had the fortune of winning a project, a bidding process with the French Agency for Development. So it's a sustainable finance and inclusive finance program in Mexico that was performed alongside the Secretariat of Housing and Public Credit. So with things like sustainable taxonomy, gender, the role of women in the financial sector, and many others in Mexico. And we're looking at electrical fees, also taxes on carbon, the emissions trade system, a hydrocarbons project, green tax stimuli, the water issue, which is an issue that the whole world faces, macroeconomic models or modeling, and green budgets, as well as public investment in sustainable infrastructure. So all these different things. One of the great, this was just after the pandemic. It was great to collaborate with the AFD in this project. We think it was a great help. And so nearly at the end, we supported the alignment of the SDGs with developments in Costa Rica. It's called Zulia. It's a really interesting project. It's a wonderful project by architect Alberto Calage from Mexico. It's very interesting to align this with the SDGs without going into greenwashing, which happens quite often. It's like basically putting a straight jacket on something, which shouldn't be the case. So you have to be super objective when you're performing in alignment with the SDGs, as well as the development of sustainability strategy in an industry that is not usually the most sustainable one, which is mining or construction materials. So we provide support in sustainability development project ARCA. It's a very interesting project. And then this is the end, I promise. We just finished the urban planning and tourist and culture heritage of Vigbania. We had 2 partial plans in it for the construction of a bridge, for all the effects that was going to have, a plan for tourism and nature as well, and also for heritage, and also a conservation management plan of the historical center. You can find all of this information in different publications. These publications are on our webpage, and they are linked to the Infonavit, which is where most of those were developed. If you need any help, if you need us to send this information in PDFs, you can send us an email. We'd be happy to share that with you. Unfortunately, most of them are in Spanish. The ones we developed with universities in the US are in English, but if it's of great interest to you, then we can help you decipher what it says in Spanish. Over to you, Jeremias.
Muchas gracias, Julia. Pues aquí
Thank you very much, Julia. So there's a lot of information here. We're sorry we don't have much time, but we wanted to talk about it. If anybody at the end of the presentation has questions, you've got our emails at the end. So if you want to talk about the initiatives, projects, or programs, we would love to do that. We'd love to send you publications as well. And I just want to go back to the objectives that we had for this forum. We wanted to present the evolution of the National Housing Project in Mexico and talk about the policy. So beyond the diagnosis of problems, it's basically looking at how it's implemented, looking at follow-up and monitoring, and also looking at objectives or taking action when the objectives aren't met. So I'm going to try to speak quickly because there are lots of slides. Kind of used to it because my partner is an architect, so they usually have hundreds of slides. So I think that's rubbed onto me. I'm an economist, and Julia showed you many images. I'll be showing you lots of graphs. Julia, if you can help me to skip through them more or less quickly. These are the objectives of the National Housing Programme. There are 5 graphs. It's quite a simple item, but I think it's worth understanding the situation that we went through with the COVID-19 pandemic for the implementation of policies in the world in general, of course, but you should always perform follow-up in this way. So first of all, we coldly analyze whether objectives are being met or not, and then we go into more detail about why the things that are happening, and then based on that you can start to get an idea of what you can do to improve that and implement all of these policies. So there are 5 objectives, as I said before: to reduce the lack of housing, to reduce operational costs of national housing organizations in relation to the houses produced or housing units produced. The other one was to increase economic activity linked to the sector. The fourth was to reduce corruption, which is one of the main issues with housing in Mexico and many countries in Latin America as well. So when we talk about corruption, people talk about it out of context, but I think in this particular context, it's very clear. The cost of housing increases by 20% because of corruption in Mexico. And the 5th objective is linked to the location of the housing. So when we talk about productivity and greenhouse gas emissions, we have to talk about locations, the location of the homes, and also low productivity and the Marchetti constant, which some of you probably know. So GHG emissions tend to grow the longer you take to transport yourself elsewhere, so or commute. So first of all, there are 2 things. First of all, none of these objectives are being met, and in second place, there is no information to even know whether these objectives are being met. These are the 2 big problems that we've found. The housing delay. So whilst it has been reduced, the objectives that were established have not been met nevertheless. And then also regarding the operational costs, we have no information about those. The GDP for the housing sector is an area where objectives are not being achieved, and there's obviously an impact because of the pandemic on that. Corruption is the construction sector is the second sector with the most corruption in general in Latin America. And in terms of the ratio of houses constructed beyond the perimeters of urban contention, which I'll explain later, there's a proxy about related to how far away they are, and it's currently worse than it used to be. So this required a greater analysis on our part. If we look at the next slide, thinking about one of the elements of adjusted housing and accessibility, which is a global issue with housing, what we see here is that the production of housing has been reducing since 2015, and that, without a doubt, if we look at the laws of supply and demand, that means there's an impact on housing prices. If we go to the next one, we're looking at the fact that in addition to this, housing, if we look at the graph on the left, we can see what kind of homes are being produced and how they're being produced. So let's say the lowest price ones have reduced in production quite substantially, which you can see on the right. You can see how many housing or cheap houses have been produced. You can see a huge fall in the production of social housing. If we move on to the next one, apart from that, if you look at housing inventories, we're basically running out of inventory. So all of these houses, moving forward, all the housing registries have seen a quick increase, but they're still below the levels we had before. So production is an issue. In addition to low levels of production, the loans or the mortgages are also being reduced, the number of mortgages. So that's something else that's happening next. In addition to this, average annual income has been maintained quite stable, whilst, as you know, inflation has made prices go up quite a lot. So what happens when production is lower? The prices go up and income doesn't. So basically accessibility is lower than before. So we've got 2014, 2016, 17, 18, 20. Accessibility has worsened. It's much harder for people to acquire a home or to rent one even in Mexico. And this is a prevalent issue around the world. So in both developed economies as well as emerging economies, we specifically see that accessibility is worsening. This is one of the elements. One of the other elements in terms of refurbished homes, we're talking about the quality of the home. So what kind of homes are being produced? The urban contention perimeters say that, first of all, if you look at the graph on the left, one is a central perimeter, number two is one that's expanding, three is in the outskirts, and outside of that perimeter means that you're completely far away from the city and from fundamental urban services. So what we see on this graph is that more than 70% of housing in Mexico is being produced far away from the cities, with all the negative implications that that has on people and the environment. Something else with regards to location, if we move on to the next slide, is that, well, the next one after that, please. So the kind of homes, if you look at the previous or the graph on the right, you can see whether it's vertical housing or horizontal housing. As you'd imagine, a lot of it is horizontal, so there's very little space to put it. In general, it's dense cities tend to have vertical housing, so that allows agglomeration economies, and it gives you many other benefits for the economy and for people as well, like access to education and employment. And what we see here is that 70% of houses that are being built in the country are horizontal properties. So there are lots of indicators that are showing us that, perhaps this is stopping us from having dense communities that are productive, and maybe it's generating socio-spatial segregation where people with lower income have to leave the city, and that has a number of negative implications on them and also on their enjoyment and well-being. Next. Another way of looking at this problem related to the quality of housing is the lack of quality in homes. So we've got housing delays. So that's linked to whether materials are available, whether people are living in an overcrowded manner, or whether hygiene is inappropriate. So these houses with delays or issues have the number of them has been quite stable over the last 10 years. There are 10 million homes that have some kind of issue in the home. So whilst new homes have increased, we still haven't been able to reduce this issue from the point of view of the number of homes that experience these delays or issues. And now, if we look at the graph on the right, we have people who are living in conditions with these delays. It's about 27%. The number of homes with these lags is slightly lower, 23%. So this basically tells us that there's also a lower concentration of people in homes with these lags. So more people living in these bad houses, with the implications that that has on their health, for example. So what do these statistics tell us? How are they reflected? Reduction in the production of home has an effect on access, the quality of homes, the location of homes, and also there's an enormous problem mentioned by Julia, which is something that she talked about right at the beginning. There are lots of homes that have no people living in them. So if you live in a home where you have a 3-hour commute, where you have to take 3 hours to go to work and 3 hours to get back, it's far away from your home, there are no schools nearby, no parks, no hospitals, perhaps safety is an issue, it's worse. Then you have a huge issue, which is the abandonment of homes. So what we're showing you here is the number of homes that are not inhabited, which is around 14%. That's around 7 million homes. So there are 7 million homes that are not currently inhabited in Mexico, and this is almost a disaster, really, a humanitarian disaster, because the few people who stay in these homes basically have no access to even the most basic services. Okay, the next one, Julia, I think we have very little time, but we've seen the issue, we've seen what the government is doing, and so we've looked at it from an economic point of view, what's happening with the budget items. Basically, we don't have too much time to look at this, but it's quite erratic. There are different programs, they peak, then there are troughs, they come and go, and in urban planning, the budget assigned to housing is minimal. And then on the next one, you can see different items on the budget, but there are basically different programs in place. They come, they go up, they go down, they disappear sometimes. For example, the program for financing and subsidies for housing disappeared in 2018 completely. There was a program for reconstruction after an earthquake that took place in the city of Mexico City. So it had great impact the first year, and then it completely reduced its work. And then all of a sudden there was a program for urban improvement that only lasted 2 years. Then we had another program for social housing, which started quite slowly, and then it increased, and then we don't know if it's going to continue or not. So all these factors have an effect on institutional capability and on people's ability to have an impact, to generate policies and programs that truly have a good impact on these results that we've seen. Next, please. And if you look at the states from 2013 to 2014, these programs, these urban housing programs, disappeared completely. So we need capacity development at the local level. Policies haven't really made sense, and that's reflected here on the graph. So we really need to look over that. We really need to try to resolve that. Go ahead, Julia. This is the budget per state. So 2012 to 2013, they all had the same budget, no matter the housing issues or lags. 2014 disappears, and then it starts to move, how we can see on the graph.
Esta inconsistencia en la política, ¿no?
So there's a
Entonces,
lot of inconsistency in the policies. What are our reflections on this? So looking at production, we need to produce more housing and better housing. Those are not my words. These are the words of someone who I heard talking from the Housing and Urban Development Institution in the US. We need to understand how to improve production. We need to produce more housing in better locations and also do it more quickly. We need to make the most of technological advances. We need to rethink mobility. We need to reduce construction costs by combating corruption, as I said earlier. And we also need a policy whereby materials are made available. Something else we can do is find better locations for housing. Given our audience here, I think this is particularly relevant because there are obviously land planning laws, and there's a link with that there. So we need to make the most of urban infrastructure, and there's lots of abandoned housing as well. So we need to have policies in place for social housing. These are just some of our reflections. I think we've run out of time. So with that, we wanted to start dialogue and answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Julia and Jeremias. We have a few questions here. I'm going to start with Paula Lebori's question. It's in English.
Going on in these Polish cities. She's referring to the Polish case. Thanks for sharing. And the question is, how instrumental is the Polish NBS hub for disseminating among other municipalities? That's one question. Then we have another question, which is my question, by the way. First of all, two basic, I mean, the basis for everything, for any kind of public policy is first the political will of authorities. How do you manage that to convince mayors, the main decision makers, to adopt this kind of projects? And second, given the political background of Poland, how you were able to actually have effective citizen participation?
I start from this two later questions. They are very, very important and not easy, of course, to answer. But the political will, especially the local authorities, has changed a lot recently because of the real challenges. So if you've got the city which is flooded, you cannot avoid the problem. So I think that in Poland, you know, that the flooding, climate change influence the water problems, but not only climate change and generally urbanization and, you know, and the sealing, the surface and the model of dewatering the city caused the huge problems with water, flooding, but also drought on the other hand. So I think that there is huge understanding, huge will that we need to do something on the local level. You know, there is no way to avoid the problem anymore. There is a lack of know-how on one hand, and there's a huge lack of the professional designers, constructors, service providers, etc., etc. So I think there's a huge transition, and I believe that the political will is, I mean, caused by the retail. Of course, is also a lot of education by many institutions. So, in my opinion, the level of political will in the local authorities is much higher. The different issue is the central government, but since they changed recently and we are going to have a new government, let's not discuss, because the model of water management was quite 20th or 19th century oriented, so to speak. So I think that the local government is much better than used to be. And the second question, which is even more complex, is also even more difficult to answer, because on one hand there is a very low level of trust in Poland. The citizen or social trust is very low. We don't trust each other. We don't trust our local governments. We don't trust at all central governments. So we are really isolated on one hand. On the other, I think the green areas, especially trees, are quite efficient way to unite people, because the citizen, so to speak, resistance or citizen protests in Polish cities are very often connected with the trees. Yeah, we like trees, and if the trees are cut, sometimes for real reasons, but people usually somehow trying to protect trees. So as the Century Foundation, we've been working with many environmental issues, so to speak. For example, I am working a lot with sewage, wastewater, water management, and they are much less popular, so to speak. So people are really into trees. And in my opinion, it's generally from the green, like a stormwater gardens. People understand, they really like to work with soil, with plants. So there is quite a huge interest from the stakeholders. Sometimes it's not very well informed, but another thing very important, I think that the Polish local green space municipalities, authorities like Krakow one, like ZZM, represented by Łukasz, they are pumping a lot of energy for education. So it's not only about maintaining green space, but they are also educating people also on the professional level, I would say. For example, in Krakow is a very strong citizen budget. And Krakow ZZM, they are really educating people how to prepare the application, how to plan the planting trees, etc. So our citizens are more and more educated, so to speak. I don't know if Łukasz would wanted to add something. It's just a short question. I think it's, of course, social dynamics much more difficult, but I hope that it will do the thing for a moment.
I agree fully with Tomasz. I could add that around these things related to trees, there is a strong activities with NGOs and a lot of people. And about the new initiative with NBS and this water management, it's very important that every year, usually there is a new financial way to create such space. Yes. So, for especially in the local budgets, yes, where there is not too many, not a lot of funds. External funds for those activities are very good looking for the politicians and for the other stakeholders.
And the first question actually, which you mentioned, the third in the chat was a little bit about how instrumental is the Polish hub, NBS hub, is led by Wrocław in disseminating other municipalities the standards. There's a kind of unfortunate situation that Monica is not with us, but we can try to answer. And the most important thing is that we've been building this hub since beginning. So there are not only two big cities, but we've got about, I don't know, please correct me, Łukasz, if I'm wrong, but tens, 20, 30 cities which are signed the partnership, the kind of contract, or maybe not contract, agreement, and they were the part of the process of developing the standards, but also they claimed or promised since the beginning they would use the standards. On the other hand, I think it's very easy to to promote these standards because cities and towns are really eager to use these standards, and we were working on the green space management for years, and there's a huge demand especially from the small towns about this kind of knowledge. So I don't know how the hub is operating, but I believe that I know that there's a huge interest in the kind of consumption, so to speak, or application of the standards on the local level. I think this is also very specific situation when that's the big cities created something for the whole Poland, actually, because usually there's a kind of competition between cities in Poland. Very often we compare to each other and we are trying to be the best. And here is something which is really like a very elegant. So we are really proud of being a part of this project, that we are producing something good for all cities, not using the central money. The whole thing was financed by the cities and by the foundation itself. So quite a big thing, I would say. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Thomas and Lucas. Sí, as you mentioned, Thomas, and as Jeremias mentioned, we need to talk beyond, political will and obviously citizen participation are the foundation for everything. But after that, we need to think in terms of how to implement and finance this initiative, as Jeremias mentioned. There is a huge issue about funding for this sort of projects and how to make these programs sustainable. Then we have, and now we go back to the Mexican experience, and we have a question. It's in Spanish, obviously. Dice, en la consultoría en países de América del Sur, ¿cuál es la
In South
probabilidad?
American consulting, what's the real probability of actually executing this sustainable planning within the municipalities? What's the percentage in terms of technical viability for the execution? And I think this is a really common issue in countries such as our own. They basically elaborate urban development plans, and they've been, written up professionally, but often cities fail to implement them. So Jeremias or Julia, either of you could answer this question, or maybe both of you. Thank you very much. Well, there are many things that come to mind. I coincide with a lot of the comments that were mentioned before. Julia, you can maybe complement what I'm saying, but basically there's definitely political a political will issue. And I think that's closely linked with the lack of information for people, a lack of transparency regarding their policies as well. So sometimes, even though they say it's something they want to incorporate in municipal and local governments, they then do not have information. And this is to do with the federal government. Sometimes people don't even know if these initiatives are actually being fulfilled. And then we also touched upon the lack of technical capacity, which is something Thomas just mentioned as well, especially in local governments. So it's linked to an inconsistency with budgets and programs, because sometimes they start programs, then they eliminate them, and governments always think in the short term, which was mentioned as well, and then all of a sudden you've got a new government and everyone changes, or the staff changes again. So human capital is a big issue when you're constantly changing officials. And so I think it's really important to see what Thomas and Lucas do, you know, development in terms of training and manual programs. I think it's really important to have these for things to continue. It's really important to really do the work and try to maintain human capital in local governments. And one of the things that we discovered, we looked at a prosperous cities index that that was created by with UN Habitat, and it compares, for example, Paris and Tijuana. So they use the same indicators for all the cities. And in Mexico, specifically in Latin America more generally, governance is the main issue, and that's basically linked to the rule of law. So what happens with cities? Let's say there's a municipal plan. As you said, sometimes they don't really look at them. There's lots of informal housing development, so that creates a problem for infrastructure, leads to expenses, and you require hospitals, streets, sewage, and schools, and you have all these externalities, as we say in economics. And so
a las ciudades, ¿no?
basically, these places are really far away from the cities, and there are lots of many other issues, but just to recap, I think there's a political will issue, a lack of transparency, a lack of information, a lack of skills, and also human capital. And I think governance is one of the main issues. So I'll give the floor to Julia so she can complement this. Thank you very much, Ramirez. I think you mentioned everything, but I also think that Joanna Romero was asking us for a percentage, and linking that to this question about the sustainability approach and the agendas of the national and subnational governments. I think this is unavoidable, really. I think everybody has to permeate either in a friendly way or in a not so friendly way. And if we're talking about, I think we're talking about the public sector quite a lot. I think private companies should also help. We had architect Alba Cortés with us earlier, who's a fantastic architecture from a firm called Tatiana Bilbao. She's a partner there, and they have initiatives where they are, you know, exerting pressure on municipalities so that they can perform projects like botanical gardens or aquariums. So as private actors, I think they also need to be in the trenches, putting pressure on the government so that the agenda can move forward, because there's just no option now. It has to be implemented, and it's part of our daily lives. And we need to, if we don't take it seriously, then we'll have hurricanes like Otis. So I do think it's important. Okay, thank you very much. We are now ready to close this activity and webinar. From one particular point of view, I think one of the reflections that we're taking with us after listening to each of you is that the execution of cities and projects with nature-based solutions or any other approach linked to sustainability in cities is linked to multi-actor networks. So there are no institutions at the government level or at the social level who can do this alone. you really require lots of know-how and you require lots of resources and also appropriation by the community itself. So really making it theirs so that it can continue over time and so that it can be transmitted to others. And also the authority, we need the institutionalization of the public policy, meaning that if decision makers change, if the government changes, this doesn't mean starting from scratch with the new administration, but rather they can use the experiences of others that have worked in the past. So, and these can continue to work as long as we're following up on those and performing follow-up so that we can improve them. And that's our focus in public policy. So there are no public policies. Another one is promoting education. So in terms of the update of human capital, working at different institutions, we also have the population. Population should understand the importance of having a clean river and the importance of having a forest that can be maintained, and homes, as you mentioned. It's important for homes to not be 2 hours away from city and 2 hours away from work, places where people work, and all the implications that this has at the ecological level, but also on people's quality of life, which is another focus in sustainability. So finally, this can be summarized with the topic that we are here for today. So capacity building for these actors that must intervene. So with that, we're now closing.
And we hope to have you in our next webinar next month. Actually, you should be in our email list, and we are going to send you information about our next webinar. Les agradecemos mucho. Pronto compartiremos información sobre nuestro siguiente
We
webinario.
will be sharing information about the next webinar, which is in the month of November. We're going to have the Interlace Consortium is going to have a meeting in Colombia in the city of Envigado. It's going to be really interesting to discuss things with you there. So thank you for everything and have a great day.
Thank you very much, and nice to see you, everybody.